Hello, awesome people. I hope you're having a great day today. Today we're taking a look at L. Sprague, DeCamp, and Fletcher Pratt's novella, 1940, published in August of 1940 in the magazine Unknown, called The Mathematics of Magic. It's the next story in this book that we're taking a deep dive into, called The Complete Enchanter. It was published in 1975 by Del Rey. I will link you to this collection so that way you can buy it and pick it up and so forth. It was shortlisted for a retroactive Hugo for one of their awards. So this is definitely something that was warmly received at the time and obviously has stood the test of time. I've been wanting to do a deep dive into these authors. I've read one book of theirs like 15 years ago while traveling, called The Tower of Xana, which I've not reviewed for this channel because I want to go back and read it if I do. It's in my short list to go back and do that for you. They are both listed on Appendix N, particularly as co-writers, as key influences on early Dungeons & Dragons by Gygax. In 1979, he published his first edition of Dungeons & Dragons in a Dungeon Master's Guide, and in that guide he has an appendix where he lists all of the sources that inspired him and are also places of inspiration to go in case you're interested in moving forward and finding new things to do, ideas for your campaign, and so forth. So it's not just a reference list like you might find at the end of a novel or a book or source book, like in this case, but instead it is a list of also places to go to for inspiration as well. So because they're on that, I wanted to do a deeper dive into them. And as you can tell from this label up there in that corner, this is another book that I picked up at the used book sale that we are doing a deep dive into over at State College when I was visiting my aunt and uncle. And they had a used book sale with about 150,000 different books in this huge giant barn on campus, and which had hundreds and hundreds of people there. Had to wait in line for a while to get in because it was all full. And it's a big thing, and all the money goes to charity there every year. It's a big part of that community. So I was going and doing that, and I picked up 7 books at that used book sale. The first one we did a review for already, The Wizard of Oz. Another one we did a review for already, called Planet of the Damned by Harrison. And now we're doing the 3 stories that are in The Complete Enchanter. So I've done the first one, the novella, written in 1940 as well, for the story of Unknown, which was published just 3 months prior to this one in May, called The Roaring Trumpet, and now The Mathematics of Magic. And The Mathematics of Magic is such a significant thing. It's actually the title of the back part of this book, as you can see, The Mathematics of Magic. So that's pretty cool. Now, note that these are just published 3 months apart, and these are really, really long. In fact, I might even argue the name novella. And here, let me give you an example. This one took me more than 5 hours to read, like 5.5 hours for me to read. The Mathematics of Magic is a longer one. It took me about an extra hour for me to read from the Roaring Trumpet, both of which were listed on Wikipedia as novellas. Okay, but it took me only for the Planet of the Damned that I just mentioned, it took me less than 5 hours for me to read it. So it was like an extra half hour for me to go from a novel to a novella, right? So this was not an easy read like a normal novella, not in an hour or two, right? Or maybe a little bit more. This is really long to read and knock out for the first time. So I question its novella status. A little bit of your mileage may vary. No issues if you think it's actually a proper novella and rather just a short novel. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I've been knocking out 40 pages a day. It takes me about probably about 100 minutes for me to knock out 40 minutes a day. So actually, no, sorry. It takes me a little bit less than 2 minutes a page for me to knock it out, because it's very dense in this collection. In order to knock it out, and I knocked out the first 10 chapters in 3 days, and then I was going to sleep last night, and I was having a little bit of insomnia, so I woke up and I wanted to see how much was left before I hit the end of this. And then I saw that there was just 1 chapter left. And I'm like, well, let's just go ahead and knock it out now. So I knocked it out last night. And then I went back for about 20-25 minutes. And then when I was done with the last chapter, I went back to sleep. I actually fell asleep. So that's how kind of cool. And I knocked it out last night in just 3 days. It also took me 3 days for me to knock out the first novella, The Roaring Trumpet, too. Now, as a reminder, I keep my reviews spoiler-free. But what's basically happening in this short story is that somebody who's living contemporaneously named Harold Shea is using magic and math and symbolic logic to move from our world to other worlds. In the first novella, he moves to Asgard and he starts meeting up with people like Loki and so forth. He comes back, he tells his supervisor named Chalmers, who's in his mid-50s. And this time Chalmers is going to go with him, and they're going to go to a story called The Fairy Queen by somebody named Spencer, which I've never read before. And they're going to be interacting with characters and things that are happening in that short story, in that series of novels, rather, that have been published, which I have not actually read. So I was less sort of involved because I'm very familiar with Norse mythology from reading a couple of sagas, the Icelandic sagas, and then popular culture's take on it, and things like the Thor comics, which I read like hundreds of when I was growing up. As well as watching the Thor movies and so forth, so you can kind of see pop culture's take on Norse mythology, as well as having read some actual proper things in Norse mythology in the Icelandic sagas, and so I was familiar with characters of like Thor and Loki and Heimdall and Odin that show up in the first book. In this one, I've not read or even heard of this novel series, so I was less involved in it. So I felt less, So when a certain knight came up or showed herself, I was less involved with it because I didn't know who these people are, right? Or if they mentioned somebody's name, I wasn't like, oh, this is a person that I know because I read that books, It was like it was set in Middle Earth or, Narnia, right, or something, or Greek mythology, since the previous one was set in Norse mythology, right, or something like that. And I can be like, oh, this is this take on Hercules. So, I looked it up and saw that this is kind of their own unique take on the Fairy Queen by this guy named Spencer. A lot of things that had happened in here actually didn't happen or aren't part of the overall storyline, according to Wikipedia. So that's kind of cool. It makes this more interesting of the thing that's happening. But basically, they're going to go to a time of dark happenings that are dark happenings, and they're going to try to save the world. And that's it. Basically it. That's the entire not novella. If you want to argue it's a novella. But the basic story is them trying to fix the world, and then that's it. That's the mathematics of magic. And again, I'm doing a deep dive into them for these reasons. Have you read the mathematics of magic? If so, what did you think of it? Would you like to talk about some of the spoilers in the comments below? Again, this thing was shortlisted for retroactive Hugo, so that definitely was warmly received then, and is still highly regarded now. So I'm giving this probably an 8- out of 10. I definitely enjoyed it. I thought there were some fun things happening in this story. But again, I wasn't as invested as probably people that who were familiar with the source material that it takes place in would have been. And so, I was probably just giving it an 8- out of 10. It's longer than the Roaring Trumpet, and I felt that the Roaring Trumpet was probably about 20 pages too long, which is one of the reasons I gave it also an 8- out of 10, or 7+ if you prefer. And so I rounded it up to an 8. So I felt that it was a little bit too much description and not enough stuff. This one has more plot to it, but it's also like a lot longer to read too. So it's longer pages too, but there's more things happening in it, so that's nice. But again, I just wasn't as invested because I wasn't familiar with source material. That happens. But there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it. If you enjoyed this review, why not hit that subscribe button? There's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And then finally, hey, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it and watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.